The BattleTech setting is a pretty well fleshed out, pretty cool, in depth setting. And the clans are an overarching faction type that I do really thoroughly enjoy. They're my favorite factional type in the BattleTech setting, and they do things a little bit differently and can be a little bit more involved in getting to grips with what the clans are all about. So let's establish some clan context. What's up, everybody? I'm James. Welcome to Mechanical Mayhem. So, clan context is going to be where I take some basically bite-sized chunks of different aspects of clan lore and discuss it on their own. I did a anthropological look into the origins of the clans in a Ramblecast, which is a podcast of sorts. So that was a lot of fun. I did it a while ago. I encourage you to check it out. But I'll be discussing with clan context things more specific to certain aspects of clan lore, but there'll still be overlap with origin stories and stuff like that, especially when I decide to discuss history/origin a little bit. But for this episode of Clan Context, I want to go over the caste system. Because this fictional settings, fictional factional group, the clans, has their own fictional caste system that, yes, is called a caste system, just like what we've had in real life throughout human history, and draws similarities to those things as well, but it's entirely its own beast. It's a fictional setting, fictional setup for it. So that's what I'll be discussing. As a disclaimer, I wanted to say that because this is the internet, and I feel like people are making it a hobby to get offended these days because they're bored or something. I don't know. But in any case, I do still encourage you to share your thoughts, any questions, any comments, any insight, just random factoids, whatever. Share it all in the comments section, and consider alpha striking that subscribe button. It's free, it helps combat the algorithm, and when you do all the YouTube notification jazz you've heard about pretty much on most every video you've probably seen, you can be part of future conversations more easily. So I hope you consider doing such, or don't.
Well,
I'm not your
sure
starter
beats
commander,
Wonderhole.
but I do hope you, at the very least, to share your thoughts in the comments. So the clans. The clans were introduced in like 1989. So while that's a few years after BattleTech started back in 1984, it's still pretty early on, especially when you consider nowadays looking back at it, right?
Kit Commander incoming.
And they weren't just some palette swap, they were a full-on ground-up bespoke style of overarching faction. So that's pretty cool. I really like that about BattleTech. It helps it feel that much more diverse and fleshed out. But with that said, when you learn about where they come from, one of the first questions that could pop up is, well, why a caste system? Right? So let's look into that before looking at the clan's 5 official traditional castes within their society. And I'll be looking at this in a generic sense for the clans, like a generic clan template that you would apply on some group. That's what I'm looking at, because each clan, Wolf, Widowmaker, Blood Spirit, Mongoose, Coyote, Smoke Jaguar, Ghost Spirit, doesn't matter. Each clan is diverse in their own kind of societal, cultural group, but they follow the same generic template for what a clan is. A big part of that is the caste system. So why a caste system? Well, Nicholas Kerensky, the son of Alexander Kerensky, is who created the clans. And he did so deliberately, not over the course of generations, but over the course of years, basically transformed and evolved his group of people into a whole new societal lens and scope, and now it's known as the clans. So the why on a lore level was to basically try and weed out greed, as well as bring an end to violence, wanton total warfare style destruction and violence. It was also an attempt to change the viewpoint of things. In real life, we have a saying, it's not always what you know, but who you know. You've probably heard something like that, basically stating, know the right person in the right place, and you can get things done for yourself that you wouldn't otherwise be able to. And we've all probably heard it, said it, or seen it in action with people where you're like, yikes, how did that happen, right? Well, the clans are the exact opposite. Nicholas Kerensky wanted to set in motion a foundation for a society that is built upon, it's not who you know, it's what you know. As merit and aptitude and ability are the most important things to the clans. It doesn't matter who your family is, what your birthright was, or whatever that case might be. What matters is what can you do and how well can you do it. That's what matters to the clans, which is pretty cool. Now, this has something to do with the caste system, but I just want to establish some groundwork for some societal kind of values that the clans have. A big part of that is also honor, not just amongst the warriors, but across all of the castes.
Very brave.
You say you're going to do something, you honor that. You give your word, you stand by it. It doesn't matter if you're one of the 4 civilian castes or the 1 warrior caste, you follow this. It's important for everybody, which is pretty neat. So, having said that, why then the caste system? Because all this are pretty interesting kind of values to have, and you can have it in almost any society. Well, I think to overanalyze it, which is what I do, we got to look at where they're descended from. It only took a few years to change the Star League forces underneath Nicholas Kerensky's command into the clans, but that's who they come from. The Star League, specifically the Star League in exile. Alexander Kerensky led the vast bulk of the Star League into exile, those that would follow him. And the Star League was a massive, massive military organization. It spanned the entirety of the Inner Now, the Great Houses had their own military as well, but the Star League exists too, right? Alongside that. And so they were in all the Great Houses' territories. They were doing periphery stuff. They were everywhere, basically. And thus, you're going to have a rather large military organization to do that in an interstellar civilization. So, I said that because that's what went into exile. Not a slice of the inner sphere, but a military organization. From command staff down to the most basic logistical supply chain person and everything in between. The warriors, the transport, the R&D, the scientists, the medics, all of that. Right? Potentially even what we would look at as kind of like civilian contractors in this day and age. Something like that too. And all of their families. That's what went into exile. So while it is a massive group, and even though not all of them went, the vast majority did, which is a big number in terms of people that go into exile, it's a very narrow slice of humanity. It's a military organization and the support staff for it, instead of a slice of the inner sphere pie. So this kind of militaristic upbringing and discipline and doctrine and whatnot is pretty, hammered into everybody there. And while the military is definitely not a caste, when you think about it, it's not that hard to see why Nicholas Kerensky would have looked into making a caste-based system for these clans because, in the military you have your role, and you perform and you excel and you can move up the ranks to a degree or however, right? And it's more so theoretically based on your merit of skill. It's not a caste system, but it definitely has certain attributes and certain ways of working that would appeal to Nicholas Kerensky, and he could find that in more of an extreme way, you could say, with a caste system. So that's what he implemented. That way you have your job role, you stay in your lane, you execute. Now, with that said, the caste system is something that the inner sphere really did not have a good understanding of. And this would lead to straight up misinformation amongst their peers and groups within the inner sphere, as well as propaganda during the clan invasion. After all, they were invading. So once you learn about how their society is, a good way to kind of conjure up resistance is to fabricate things. How the warrior caste doesn't care about those beneath them. Everybody's just an disposable, expendable number, and so on. Partly driven, of course, by the needing propaganda to light a fire under your defenders' hearts, or under your defenders' feet, I should say, light a fire in their hearts, so they can maybe fight a bit harder and not get just steamrolled, right? And another part of it is legitimate misunderstanding of clan society. The truth is, all the clans have numerous subcastes within their castes, right? So every clan's got the caste system. Within the caste system, within each caste, you could say, are subcasts. things that based upon, let's say, your warrior type or your specialty as a tradesman or something like that, whatever the case is. And there's a lot of, pride and honor that goes into the civilian caste as well, even if they're not being treated as nicely by certain clans over others, depending upon which clan you're looking at, of course. But they're also, like I said, big into honor and whatnot, and they are very much responsible for the day-to-day operations of the clans. The warrior caste, which is the first caste we'll get into, and the one that's most well known because of all the gaming and whatnot, they may be the absolute rulers, which they are, but it's the rest of the caste that ultimately keep the clan machine rolling, and in turn allow the warrior caste to do what they do. So the misconception is that the warrior caste basically is micromanaging to the nth degree every other caste and all that jazz. And the truth is, they're not sitting pretty riding on the coattails of the other castes, but they're not, holding every caste at sword point or anything like that to do things. They are very much a part of that massive machine that is the clans. So let's start looking at those castes then. The first one up is the warrior caste. Now, as I mentioned, this is, the warriors. They are also the absolute leaders of the clans. Your leadership is your warrior caste. They are in charge of protecting the clans. So for being the clan in charge and having all the fancy tech, because they are the most resource intensive of the clans in terms of using resource. Military isn't cheap, and training up the warriors isn't cheap, especially doing the whole true-born warrior concept that they do. They're still the smallest population with the shortest average lifespan based on their activities and the hazards of it, which I found kind of interesting when you think about it. So with that said, we have the warrior caste leading everybody. And it has different subcastes as well in it, usually depending upon the style of warrior it is. While there is very little movement from one caste to another, there is still movement up or down, quote unquote, up or down. And with the warrior caste, the only way to move from here is into one of the civilian castes if you wash out, fail out for whatever reason. You're not just ended, you do just end up in a different caste to serve. Which is a fate worse than death for a lot of Sibkin, trying to make it as a clan warrior. From there, we have the science caste. The science caste is responsible for a lot. It's responsible for R&D, the technology, all that jazz of the clans. It's responsible for the genetic engineering for the Trueborn warriors. It's also responsible for health. They're not just engineers and scientists and geneticists. They're doctors. They're also teachers. They're responsible for teaching too. And as such, they also are kind of monitoring all the civilian castes with assessments and tests for the children as they grow in the civilian castes to see if they are in the best position to serve the clan. So if you score particularly high or particularly low in an assessment, you could be basically transferred to another caste, for better or worse, depending upon your point of view, to best serve the clan. That doesn't happen that much, but it is a plausibility, depending upon how you test with these assessment tests. So that's what the science caste does, research and development, all that good stuff, plus health and teaching and all that jazz. So from there we have the technician caste. The technician caste is an interesting one because they serve all the other castes. You have excavation equipment. We can service it, we can fix it, we can make more if we need to. You have a centrifuge and other stuff that needs calibrating, computers that need programming for your delicate research and whatnot. They're the caste that can do it, or will do it, right? Members of their caste will take care of that. Mining equipment, infrastructure for production and manufacturing, they'll obviously take care of all that. In terms of repairing it, it's just whatever needs to be made or repaired, the technician caste is probably going to be, in terms of technology, the technician caste is on it. They're also the caste that serves as most of the crew for jump ships, warships, and certain drop ships of the clans. So it's a good chance the personnel that's doing the day-to-day grind of keeping that warship operational is a technician caste member. We then have the merchant caste. Now the merchant caste has a little bit of a chip on their shoulder because they're merchants. They're mercantile. They want to make that money, right? They want to import and export and trade, and so they can overstep their bounds a bit. They can have a overly inflated view of themselves a little bit, and so on. And if you're not careful, they can start doing some background dealings, just feeling like they're trying to make a profit for stuff, and that could end up hurting the clan, despite that they're doing it because they want to help the clan. So probably got to monitor these guys more than the others. The merchant caste isn't just about trading, though. They're not just buying and selling, importing and exporting. They're also involved in the manufacture of the goods. They're also involved with, as kind of like artisans, making the pottery and making some of the more artistic type stuff, including productions like shows and things of that nature. The merchant caste, is doing the merchant stuff, but beyond that, they're also kind of selling culture, if you will, by doing those like productions and making stuff for the kids to kids programming and stuff like that. So a lot more than just what can I sell, what can I buy. And then lastly, we have the laborer caste, the most numerous of all the castes, and they farm, they build the facilities, they'll probably take care of the bulk stuff in factories, stuff like that. They're skilled trades people for sure. It's different from a technician caste. A technician caste is going to diagnose, repair, and refit things, where a labor caste is going to build it. Labor caste is going to swap out parts. Labor caste is going to do the farming. Labor caste is going to, do the shipping, not so much in space, but like literally if there was like a crab boat, that would be a labor caste job, things of that nature. So they're like almost in a way the breadbasket of the clan, as well as the one that makes the roads and makes the buildings and everything else. So those are your 5 actual castes: laborer, merchant, technician, science, and warrior. Warrior leads everybody, and in theory all the other castes do what they do to support the warrior caste, so the warrior caste can keep them alive and keep the clan strong and all that. So an interesting kind of setup, right? Not every caste is just what you read about in face value, and I think that's pretty cool. And lastly, to kind of wrap things up, there is one other kind of quote-unquote caste, and this is known as the bandit caste or the dark caste. This is for all the misfits and those who can't fit in or choose not to fit into the clan society. If you're just a disciplinary problem and you slip through the cracks and you don't get reformed, or you don't get imprisoned or forced labor or whatnot, you end up as like a dark caste type of person. Just kind of reinforcing that this is still humanity. They still are humans, still have a criminal element to them. It's gonna exist no matter where you go. So that is the quote-unquote dark caste or bandit caste. And that's it for the generic castes of the clans. Maybe they have some different caste levels or subcaste stuff within this, depending upon which clan you're looking at. But down the middle, it's warrior, science, technician, merchant, and laborer. Those are your castes. When the caste system first was introduced, you had to test in, and depending upon how you tested into joining a clan is where you ended up. That's how the initial batch of warriors happened. Nicholas Kerensky had to take his own test. And while he is somebody that you could definitely say has some psychological issues and a penchant for power, I think it's rather telling his belief in his system and the fact that he had to test himself into it as well. He didn't just grandfather himself and some of his higher-ups in it. Everybody had to test. And that gets carried on with the warrior caste doing constant testing of their true-born warriors. And then, of course, you have the civilian caste, like constantly are undergoing assessments as they grow up to make sure they're going to be in the best position to serve the clan that they can be. And that's your, in not so nutshell, bite-sized chunk, if you will, on some clan context for the caste system. It's different. It's definitely influenced by historical caste system stuff for humanity, but I will say that I think they did a good job of making it its own thing, and I rather like the idealistic concept behind it. In practice, not everything's going to be perfectly smooth, but the clans castes do really need each other. The merchant caste is going to allow the military to be strong because a strong economy, a clan that isn't suffering economically, is going to be able to have the resources to bulk out their military, right? A good science caste is going to make everybody healthier and so on down the line. So I think it's pretty cool. Anyways, with that said, what are your thoughts? Thanks so much for tuning in and stopping by. Remember, Alpha Strike that subscribe button if you care to or don't. Not your Star Commander, but just keep that in mind. Definitely share your thoughts. I don't know what I'm going to cover next for Clan Context, but there's plenty of stuff to do that on, so stay tuned for that, amongst other stuff, of course, here. And until next time, take care.